Hey, well, good to see you. I'm so glad you're here at GA with us. We've been talking online leading up to GA about what people are calling the apology overture. And there's been, I actually am surprised at the level of controversy and the conflict that there is around this. Essentially, the overture asks the church to apologize for harms done to LGBTQ persons in the process of the past 35, 40 years of debate over this issue, and prior to that, where people were excluded from service, but more than excluded from service, also there were court cases, there were trials, there were defrockings, there were all sorts of situations which arose where concrete harm was done. And the apology overture asks us to say as a church that we regret that and we are going to do better in the future. So what do you think is important for people to know about it, and what would you like people to come away with?
Well, I think we need to recognize that the harm is greater than just those who are candidates for deacons, elders, and teaching elders, and that sometimes membership was even barred for certain people. People, even with just a minority voice in the church, were kept from serving. And I think we need to recognize that we lost a lot of really great folks, and we really haven't heard a lot of those stories. I know that All May Freely Serve across the way has been collecting some of those stories, and so what I'm asking folks to think about is amending that overture to start a truth and reconciliation process that may lead to a full apology after we've actually recognized all of the different hurts and pains that people have experienced. So I happen to serve a Presbyterian UCC congregation, and so I'm in our annual conference, and every time I go to annual conference, I see the Presbyterian contingent that is there. And many of them would get frustrated because the other people don't know Robert's Rules of Order as well as they do. But
that's amazing how when you get out of the Presbyterian context, all of a sudden you see your own context more clearly.
and many of those folks are ministers in other denominations, and especially the United Church of Christ, where they have found their gifts celebrated for many years.
We have with us Bruce Reyes Chow, who was the moderator of the 218th General Assembly. We have Susan Andrews, who was the moderator of the 215th General Assembly. We have Marta Munoz, who is from the Iglesia Presbiteriana de Colombia, the Presbyterian Church of Colombia, and Emily Brewer, the co-director of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, will be doing interpretation for her. And finally, John Fife from the 204th General Assembly. And so now I turn it over to all of you. Thank you so much.
For me, the fossil fuel issue is not an issue. Climate change is not an issue. Climate change is an urgent catastrophe. And that this is an issue that affects every human being on the face of this earth. And the longer we wait, the more we are desecrating what God has created us and given us to take care of. And I certainly hope that this assembly will be bold to take this action now, to join 500 other educational and religious institutions that have taken this stance, and to be on the right side of history, but most importantly, to be with God's energy around this issue. Thank you.
What UNCO is UNCO is a group of people who said, you know what, we're tired of going to conferences where they're talking heads, experts who tell you what you need to do to save your church. We want to just get together with other people who are in it, who are doing crazy kinds of ministry that takes all shapes. It's not just pulpit on Sunday morning, it's also on the street on Tuesday afternoon, and it's also like in the bar on Sunday nights. It's in all these locations, and we want to get together, and we want to share ideas together, and we want to dream together, and we want to vision, and we want to come up with stuff ourselves without depending on someone else who's supposedly an expert to tell it for us.
I also think it's important to talk about, just to even broaden that lens a little bit further, to talk about the way that our silence and our exclusion has contributed to the broader cultural conversation, which includes all of the harms that maybe we wouldn't lay directly at the foot of the church as a form of intentional action, but as a form of silence and complicity in the kind of homophobia and hatred that has resulted, for example, in the violence last week in Orlando. Orlando. But even beyond that, just the number of LGBTQ youth, teenagers who commit suicide or who find themselves having to live on the streets, or people who go through personal crises, that there wasn't a church there to support them, to help them, or even that when they went to the church for help, they were excluded, cut off, rejected.
And that's why I think the work of the Family Acceptance Project is so important, and the work that Dr. Caitlin Ryan at San Francisco State University is doing. And if we're able to use some of those resources that I refer to in the article to be able to help folks realize that they can decrease the self-harm that especially young people are at risk if they have accepting families and accepting church families. They're 8 times less likely to have suicidal ideation, 5 times less likely to try risky sex, 4.5 times less likely to try risky drugs. And just helping our congregations and the families find a way to affirm their children as they are discerning about who they are and doing their theological work elsewhere, so they can really save their children's lives in many ways.
Folks are going to get caught up in the word divestment. Read the Overture, because it is rich and it is meaningful and it is powerful in how it goes about enacting this. Finally, the last thing I want to say is, as moderator of a General Assembly, whenever we traveled, folks would say, who cares what the General Assembly says? They're always symbolic. Every moderator also knows that when we travel to other countries, to other people, to places not connected to us, and we say the Presbyterian Church USA has taken this stand, it has meaning. We may not always back it up with the work that we need to, but the decisions we make, even symbolic, often unleash and inspire and ignite movements of change beyond this very, very space. The symbolic act is powerful.
And UNCO has been, without a doubt, the singularly most effective and generative conference experience or continuing ed type experience I have had as a pastor, as a minister, as a sort of like entrepreneurial spirit on the margins and fringes of the church. So if you haven't been to an UNCO, I highly encourage you to investigate it and to come and join us. Plus, we're the weirdest and most fun group of church people we've ever hung out with.
A lot of people thought after we accomplished marriage, whatever that means at the last assembly, that okay, we've hit the milestone, the fight's over, and it should be amply evident to us by the violence that's still in our society, by the HB2, the bathroom bills, by the various ways in the backlash that has happened in the last couple of years, that the work is far from over. The work of learning to be a truly just and inclusive community, a truly just and inclusive church, it doesn't stop with one overture, one assembly, one time.
That's right, and our young people are claiming new names for describing who they are, and so that's even a conversation within the LGBTQ community. For a certain older generation, using the word queer was a slur word. It was like using the N-word. For younger people who have claimed that and reclaimed it as a queer or a gender queer person, and instead of being bisexual, many are describing themselves as pansexual or every gender loving, and using language that specifically works against the gender binary.
Right.
That is so much a part of the colonialism that was such a part of.
Right.
Y he visto la destrucción
And I've seen the destruction
y la explotación
and the exploitation
de nuestros territorios,
of our territories, of our lands.
bastante ricos.
These lands are very rich.
Hemos visto ríos inundados de petróleo,
I have seen rivers full of oil,
animales muertos.
dead animals.
Aquí hay algunas fotos.
There are some photos here,
Se han escrito documentos
and we've written documents
sobre las implicaciones que nos causan las petroleras en nuestro país.
We've written documents about the implications of the oil companies in our country.
¿Qué pasa cuando entra una petrolera a un pueblo, a una ciudad?
What happens when an oil company comes into a town or city,
Y no estoy en contra del desarrollo,
and it's not in opposition to development?
pero esto trae que se acabe la biodiversidad.
But what happens is that the biodiversity is harmed.
Ríos contaminados y envenenados.
Rivers are contaminated and full of poison.
comunidades de indígenas que tienen que salir debido a
Indigenous communities are forced to leave
la violencia
because of the violence
que trae
that
el tener una petrolera en un lugar.
the existence of these oil companies brings to their land.
UNCO also is known as a factory of things. We make stuff, we create stuff. Coming out of UNCO, we constantly, every year there's new things that come out of it. Multiple books have come out of it, so the bundle of books over there, those were all books that were born at UNCO. They were inspired at UNCO. And other things that come out of UNCO have been the innovative ministry percolator, which is actually the primary reason for tonight. IMP, as we call it, is the idea of IMP is to find ways for innovative ministries to lean on each other for support for best practices and to find funding sources together.
This is essential because what this does is mark a dramatic change in the Presbyterian churches, advocacy, protest, but to move that, the important step in bringing about the change that we all hope for. And let me simply say that never in the history of this nation, and I believe way beyond this nation, has any meaningful social change occurred without making the move from advocacy and protest and education to active nonviolent resistance strategies. I think if you read history, that becomes more and more evident and true. And what this overture does is move this church from education and advocacy and policy statements to active nonviolent resistance with our money.
Good morning, everybody. Day one of General Assembly, and I'm already operating on less than 4 hours sleep. Woohoo!